Well, talking about AI and how to make it work in your organization, what the tricks are and what the preconditions are, if you like, for making it work. So I'm going to be quiet for a second to let Vince introduce, because Sparkwise are the people who organize this. Vince, do you want to introduce very quickly what we are all
Yes,
here for?
Don. Yeah, sounds good. Well, I'm glad everyone joined, and thank you, Don and Peter, for being here today as well. Hi, everyone. I'm Vince Jeong. I'm co-founder and CEO of Sparkwise. We are a platform that helps people collaborate in real time and learn skills and really co-create change together. And we like to talk to different leaders in the learning space, in the cutting edge technology space, to really understand how are organizations grappling with what's going on today and using technology and other means to really adapt to change. And I'm really excited about this topic today. Of course, there's AI, we can't escape it, is everywhere all the time. But one of the, I think, topics that I'm really interested in diving into, and I know, Don, you've been doing great research on it, and Peter, you're living it, is how are leaders, especially in the learning function and the people function, harnessing AI as an opportunity to drive impact, work on matters that are really CEO level, and help people adapt to change. So I'm very excited to talk about this topic with you too.
It's a
But
really important topic. Yeah. Sorry, go on, Vince. Sorry, I
no,
cut you
I
off.
know. No, I was gonna hand over, Don, to you to help us facilitate the conversation.
Sure. Well, let me introduce myself quickly, then I'll introduce Peter, and then let's crack on. So I'm Donald Taylor, and I'm always in print as Donald H. Taylor, but I tend to be called Don, so that's why it says Don Taylor on the camera. And I have chaired the Learning Technologies Conference in London for 25 years. I also do research and talk about it. Most recently, 3 reports in the last 12 months on AI in learning and development. One of the case studies, in fact, 2 of the case studies we featured are from Ericsson in the last 2 reports. And that's written with my co-author, Igla Vinel-Skeiter, with whom I had a great coffee this morning. We talked about all our plans for next year, which are going to be exciting. Do other things as well, like I'm an advisor to Sparkwise, which is why we're here and we're having this conversation. I'd love to hand over to Peter now. If you'd introduce yourself very quickly, Peter, then let's get into this question of how do we use AI in L&D. Peter, who are you?
Okay.
Who are you?
Okay. Thanks so much, Don. Who am I? I work in Ericsson. Ericsson, if you don't know us, we are a telco company. We basically do all the Gs. So whether it be 5G, 4G, we create the network infrastructure that makes your mobile work. And I've worked in, I suppose, HR and L&D for about 37 years, something like that. And in various companies, IBM, Philips, Ericsson, and the job that I do is I work with the global infrastructure for learning and development.
Which is, yeah, you make it sound so simple. It's a big job. I wish it were. So I'm going to just jump in straightforward. We're talking about AI in L&D. Let's try to define what we mean by AI. And that, obviously we could be here all day talking about that, but let's try and keep it brief. I've got my own thoughts about it. My thoughts about it extend a bit beyond what we tend to talk about with AI. So I'm going to start off with Vince, because you know a bit about technology. You're living this. So very quickly, what do you want to say when you say AI? What does it mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess,
and what does it mean? And what does it mean for learning and development?
Yeah, so obviously, broadly speaking, AI, like we used to have AI before, and then Gen AI came.
Yeah.
If you make a really broad definition, it's just any like sort of machine-driven things that allow you to do things more smartly. Now, I think in a lot of the cases today, people are, when they say AI, they're actually talking about generative AI and its ability to really help people produce outputs, do better work, better. So I guess for me, the way I would think about AI as part of this discussion is, what are the things that weren't really possible before with technology that now AI gives you tools to do in terms of productivity, workflow change, organizational operation, and how do you actually harness that?
And that stuff you've just described goes well beyond the Gen AI that we saw launched 2 years ago with ChatGPT. Peter, what's your take on AI? How can you describe it to us very quickly so that we can get our heads around what we're talking about?
Okay, I look at AI through three lenses, I think. One, through what AI means for your business, what AI means for your employees, and what it means for L&D. Your direct question, Don, was around what does it mean for L&D? And I think it's about pushing L&D up the value chain. We will get into, I think, during this session around how we achieve that. But essentially, it's I think, enabling us to do our job faster, better. So for us, it's a great opportunity, I think, in my views. I know there's kind of concerns about what it means for our jobs, but for me, it's about pushing L&D up the value chain to ensure that we make more impact across our businesses and our organization.
I think we're going to come back to that later on, Peter, because I think this whole idea of AI providing L&D with the ability to have more impact, for me, is essential. It's a core piece of what we're talking about today. And I think there are some fundamental things there, which if you've read the report that Egla and I put out last month, and you know this, Peter, for us, it rests, after having thought about it a lot, not on the things we use AI for in L&D, but it rests on other things. So we're going to come back to that in a second. I think for me, the crucial thing about AI, as Vince was saying, is that it enables us to do things at scale that we couldn't do before. So for me, when we talk about AI, we talk about a combination of a bunch of things. It's the ability, what happens if you get powerful algorithms, cheap storage, storage of data, cheap processing power, and algorithms that people have worked on for a long time to manipulate and recognize patterns and predict things. So if you have all those things together, and those algorithms can learn, then you've got something which can change, as you say, Peter, how you work at a tactical level, but also strategically. And practically speaking, I'd say, if you imagine you had an infinite number, well, let's say an infinite number of people working for you who could take instruction pretty well and do a job, that's what you've got when you've got AI. But of course, they're not infallible. You have to check the work they've done. Peter, everything that I've done looking at AI in L&D for the past year says that when people use AI in L&D, as Vince says, they're focused on the generative AI tools that we've seen just coming out. I say just, in the past 2 years, and there've been tremendous strides with those. They are extraordinary. We're focused on content with that. For you, what are the implications of that?
I think the implications in terms of when you start at the content end is that you can increase the efficiency of and the speed, of course, at which you generate learning. There are obvious things and the kind of the easy in on AI, which are things like translations. We're in 180 countries in Ericsson. One of the things, very typical issue that we would have is Canada came to us and said, our exams, our credentialing that we run internally for our Ericsson products, they need to be in Canadian French. We need all the exams translated ASAP. We utilize AI to get that done at very low cost, very quickly. So so once you start at the course end, it's also enabling things like we have you can start to create content through using text to video tools, those sorts of things. We started with a small pilot where we thought, well, we'll just get a few people in and testing out this text to video tool. Before we know it, we got over 1,000 people using it.
Wow.
And genuinely finding it useful before we go out to the whole company with this. And people are utilizing in the learning space that with typical tools like Articulate, that then means that they can use Gen AI to source find out the real expertise around a topic. They put all that text, they can then put it into a video tool, then generate the speaking heads, the talking heads on it. And suddenly you've got learning fairly instantly. So, there are undoubtedly efficiency gains here for L&D in what L&D traditionally does, which is generate courses.
What L&D traditionally does. You've left that deliberately hanging in the air there, as I mentioned, what else we might do in the future. I like that. Yes, and I asked the room, by the way, so please do share your thoughts in the room, because I am a firm believer that we learn and we advance best when all of us share thoughts. No one person in the room is smarter than all of us if we work together. And I've already got Marcia, Kelly, and Ivana coming in. And Ivana's point, I'm a little concerned about the expectation that AI is further along in the content development space. How much review is involved in the translation? They can do it quickly, but how accurately is it done? She's asking, and we're going to come back.
Well, that's a great question.
Go on, Peter.
I can answer that directly. Is that was actually part of Ivana? That was actually part of our POC around this. Is how accurately can we do this? Now, it was kind of fortunate that the person that was leading this at the time was French, so she could exactly tell how close this was, and super close. Is a French native speaker could say. There are some languages that were worse than others, so it wasn't consistent across the whole piece, but you can get this material pretty accurate using Gen AI tools.
I'm just putting a little note in the chat with a link to the report, and you can download that. You don't have to. That's on my website, but you don't have to register or anything for it. You just go and download it. And the person Peter's talking about is Pauline Rebaud-Jeong, who ran the Learning Next group, where they have a great methodology of assessing new technologies, not just AI, but new technologies generally. And for me, that whole methodology is worth exploring in its own right. Great question. Other things that are coming from the chat, we could use AI to scan through numerous needs analysis, Marcia says, to detect the themes and trends. That makes sense. Fewer pre-packaged trainings, AI can provide real-time tutoring assistance, says Kelly. I use AI a lot. This is the personal stuff you're talking about, Peter, to summarize for emails, notes, articles, and I use it a lot myself actually on the emails. Zlot is saying feedback's the most undervalued but one of the effective tools we have, and now you can scale that with AI. I'd love to hear more about that if you have any experience. Certainly, you're right about that. And Peter, what tool are you using, by the way, by the way, if you're sending a text, sorry, if you're sending something in chat, please send the chat to everyone. Peter, what tool are you using for the translation? Do you happen to know what it is?
It's actually a proprietary tool that we're using. It's an Ericsson translation tool. We have tested the Microsoft equivalent, and then we actually stuck with our own.
Okay.
So sorry for anybody at Microsoft is on the call, but we are using Copilot as well, I should say.
There you are. Laureline has said that she's going to put the report I posted into Notebook LM. I've got a whole story about that. I'm not going to hog the microphone. Tiffany, Tiffany, good to see you. Tiffany, could you repost that you sent it to hosts and panelists. Could you resend it to everyone? It's a really useful comment. I'd just like it if you could stick it in for everyone to read. If we put it to everyone, then we all share it. And look, David Freeman and I think it's Sinead is saying, AI is great for brainstorming and also for generating case studies from typical scenarios. So it enables us to do things which previously would have taken a lot of time in terms of creating content, as Peter alluded to at the end of his little bit there. But there are other things we can use it for, of course, and we're going to get to that. Vince, we're dwelling on content at the moment because that's where we start with the generative AI piece. What do you think? Is there anything else we should be thinking about? Are you focused on the content piece yourself?
I think so. I think the question I heard behind your question is a lot of the focus is on content creation, and why is that the case? I think number one is undoubtedly it is efficient and there's real value there. But I think it actually shows a little bit in my mind. I think Peter alluded to this opportunity for the broader L&D to actually move up the value chain of what L&D can do. So I actually think of L&D's role maybe in 3 tiers. I'm curious if you would agree. I think it's generally there's kind of for lack of a better word, I'll call it compliance. Like there's just stuff people need to know to do their job really well. And I would say 99% of L&D definitely does that role because every company needs that, some function to play that role. Now, the second level I would say is enablement, like enabling your people to do their work better. And I would say actually L&D has a mandate there, but I would argue that some L&D teams are great at that and other L&D teams aren't as good at that because enablement needs to go beyond content creation for you to change people's behaviors. And then the top tier that I actually don't see that many L&D teams engaged in, but I think should be today, is transformation. Like for companies that actually use AI, you have to rewire the operating model, the team structure, the workflows. Like things have to really change fundamentally. And that is like beyond like getting your task done faster today, but you might just not do that task and do something very differently. And I feel like today L&D is not really, many L&Ds are not playing at that space. They're really focused on the compliance and some at the enablement level. And so at least in my mind, when I talk to different vendors, I see these different tiers playing out. And I feel that AI is an opportunity for L&D to change the problem it's solving inside the company. I think that the transformation thing is becoming so critical that it's a CEO level agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something that L&D can actually elevate to play because of the need is there. The question is like, how do you get there? But anyways,
Yep.
I think that's kind of interesting reason why I think is mostly content creation still in L&D instead of more sophisticated use cases required to play at the other levels.
I think there are lots of reasons. Let's explore that now. I think it's the crucial question.
Yeah.
We know we can make stuff and more stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, Zolt raises a really good point. Content cutting should be our priority, not creation, he says. And Evan agrees. Good point. We could cut surplus content and root out duplicate stuff. Exactly. So there's more than one way of playing this game. And Spencer is pointing out that we can use it for skills taxonomies and assessment, and we can actually therefore cut out unnecessary sharing and therefore personalize. Tiffany agrees with your point about transformation. So let's talk about how we go from, if you like, the tactical efficiency within the L&D space to that broader strategic role, Vince. My co-author, Egla Vinal-Skaita, in that report, I put the link in the chat, she produced something called the complexity scale, which goes from simple to sophisticated, and effectively has 3 boxes in it. It's got a bunch of stuff across it, but on the simple side, we've got, when I say simple, it means a simple use of AI in the sense that it doesn't involve anybody else. So it's a simple use of AI. It's just involved on making the L&D department itself more effective. Right on the other side of the scale, underneath sophisticated, there are things like skills management, personalization, performance support. And these are more things around, but particularly the skills management piece. These are more things around general business implementation. These are things which affect the whole business. And then in the middle, there are things which I would group together as point solutions, things where you're going in there with AI to solve a particular problem. And typically, we hear a lot about coaching tools now. There are some great case studies of people using AI in order to find, well, to look at tens of thousands of hours of transcripts of conversations in sales with customer support, and support and boil those down to good and bad and train people up on how to have better conversations. That's one example of a point solution. There are many different point solutions, obviously. How do we get from that business, Peter? You're working at Ericsson. You're one of the few companies that are, for me, you're working right at the sophisticated end of the spectrum. The sophisticated end of the spectrum is where you're working across the business, or the business itself is adopting AI. And it's doing that in Ericsson, particularly with skills. How did you get there? What happened? What were the drivers? And can you talk us through that a bit? Because I think that's going to be of interest to people in the room.
Yeah, I think if you start at that sophisticated end, I think the thing we should say is we're trying to work at the sophisticated end.
That's a fair point. And you're being realistic. You're not dumbing it down, but you're also, I think, referencing there that this is a complicated and big job, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a complex area, and you know what both AI combined with skills enables us to do is to power some of our people processes with skills, and that means, I think, as L&D professionals, we can make more a contribution across a broader scale across all of our people, or a lot of our different people processes. And if you look at how we do that, then, you know, and that really relates to ensuring that you have a dynamic and automated approach to skills. You know, if you're going to put your skills into your jobs, and why did we want to do that? Well, in Ericsson, we really, if you wind the clock back 4 years, we really hadn't a clue what skills we got in the organization. You know, we didn't have transparency and what I call visible simplicity across our processes. You know, if you want to do, Don, if you want to be an account manager, you want to know what skills you needed to be an account manager. That drives the learning, but it should drive also the recruitment. So let's take that from what that means in terms of a process. So if I'm, as a manager, I want to pull together, I've got a vacancy, I want to understand what the skills are that I need to recruit to get those vacancies, and those need to be the greatest, the latest and greatest skills. That requires AI to help you get there, to source, to scrape those skills, but also to understand the skills adjacencies. So you need that level of skills intelligence to ensure that you've got the right skills there that you're surfacing in when you're recruiting. Let's then take it when you then advertising those job roles, and the employee wants to be able to find that job and see whether they've got the right skills, and do that gap analysis. And then you want, the employee says, okay, I'm a little bit short on some of those skills. I need some learning, I need some experiences, some projects, maybe assignments, to help me build my skills. And you then got that visible simplicity running across. So so AI is helping you enable those skills to be dynamic. The sort of skills taxonomy that Spencer talks about in the chat, the assessments that go on, it should flow through the assessments if you've got assessment methodologies. Give you another example. If you want to enable people to understand and become interested in particular jobs, perhaps you've got a skills shortage in one area of your business, you can start to think about, well, do I run a career fair? We had a skills shortage a few years ago in cloud skills. We wanted to run a global careers fair internally for those skills. And how do you identify the people you invite? And one of the ways we did that was to get AI to help us with the skills adjacencies.
Right.
So you can then understand people that have skills that are close, that are fairly easy retrainable into those sorts of job roles. So you can, I think what you can start to achieve with the combination of AI enabling a dynamic and automated approach is to start to have impact on a lot of these different people processes, and start to give employees a whole lot better experience. They start to see that things are joined up with that visible simplicity.
And you said 4 years ago we had no idea what our skills were, but nobody did. Well, perhaps a handful of companies. At least you asked the question. For most organizations, the default is, this is how we operate. Nobody thinks about it, as you've just described, that there are a series of points of individual and corporate experience where the solution to that comes down underneath to a good understanding of what the skills are, definitions of what skills we have, what skills we need, and how we make a bridge between the two. And if you have that information, that then percolates into so many things, from writing a job description to running an internal, as you say, special camp for getting people together, to finding somebody for a particular job, to almost everything that relies on people being able to do things.
Mm.
So quick question. So Nancy says, agreed. So how are you capturing the skills using AI? I was about to ask the question. I think we should pass the microphone to Nancy. Many times it's unstructured data. So she's right? So what's the AI doing there, Peter, to make all this possible?
Yeah, I think it's doing a couple of things. It's sourcing this. When you've sourced the skills, it's then looking at the relationships. You're having algorithms to then look at the relationships between skills. Now, what does that enable you to do? It enables you to then have dashboards and so on that recommends skills for specific job roles.
Yeah.
So we have in Ericsson over 90 job role owners. These are people in the business who are experts about their particular job roles, whether it be an account manager, whatever it may be. We supply them with dashboards that helps them get to what are the right skills. And when those skills are updating, then they get informed of what the skills are. So you then have the very latest skills.
And when you say that, the very latest skills, your technology was going out and doing this searching and doing what I described earlier. Imagine you have 1,000 people who can take instruction, but they need to be guided a bit. Effectively, that's what the AI is doing. It's going out and doing this work, which for a normal team would be impossible, but they're going off and they're scouring all the data out there, internally and externally, to see what skills we've got and to define the skills externally as well. Is that fair enough?
Yes, exactly. But there's another side to it as well, Don, which is that, and we're not as far down the road with this, but it's also about understanding the skills that you have. So you know, in job roles and so on, you're specifying the skills that you need. I also want to be able to show the skills I have. I want to show the best of Peter, and you can get to that through skills inference. So we give to an external company all the different skills profiles. I'm sure many people on this call, like us, have multiple systems with multiple skill profiles in them. We give that external company those skills profiles. We also give them all our learning data, all the positioned career history data of people, and they create a one skills profile of that individual that shows all the skills that person has. Now, we're at early stages of this, but we are planning, in next April, that we have our people will have performance and development, career and development conversations with their line managers to help them think about this. They'll get a skills profile of them.
Yeah.
Now, where do you go there? Then after that, you potentially put that one skills profile through all your systems. So just as the way you have a taxonomy running through a red thread, like a red thread through all the systems, you have also that skill profile running through.
Yeah.
And so AI enables you to infer and aggregate the best of the skills that people have. And that helps really with mobility, helps with learning and so on across the organization.
That business of mobility is crucial. The more people I talk to who are doing this at the moment at various levels of complexity, mobility comes out as being one of the key wins, is that you increase internal mobility, and that incidentally reduces churn. And reducing churn means that you've saved the company typically an enormous amount of money. I'm going to come back to how on earth you persuade an organization to shift like that. I just want to say, if you get to the stage where by next April, people are doing performance conversations based on that data, you have got to a position already where you've done a fantastic job that most organizations would struggle to do. It's a bit like when the city of Chicago installed sewerage, and Chicago was built on a swamp, and they had to lift the buildings up with hydraulic jacks by about 5 feet, install the sewerage underneath, and then build the city on top of this. So it's like you've got a whole building, a company in existence, and somehow you've got to lift the whole thing up and put the plumbing and the infrastructure in place underneath it. But it is possible. It just takes a lot of coordination and work. Poor Peter's been talking all this while. It is what we want to hear, Peter. In a minute, I'm going to ask you next. All right, so where does the buy-in come for all this, for this massive change? I want to just ask a quick question. And Vince, as well as being Sparkwise founder, you've got a background in consultancy and in transformation there, right? Got some questions coming in here about, shouldn't we be going beyond jobs and so on? So we've got, Zolt saying, shouldn't we think beyond roles and jobs and more along skill sets? And also, Nancy is saying, how does this impact how people are being compensated for skills versus the job title? Suppose you've got somebody, I'm guessing, I'm sort of putting words in Nancy's mouth. Suppose you've got somebody who's really highly skilled at something, it doesn't necessarily get reflected in their job title. From your past, Vince, where I know you were quite involved in helping organizations transform, what sort of difficulties do you see from the sorts of things that Peter's describing, the change that you have to go through here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So a few things come to mind. The first one, which I think you'll get to with Peter, is the fact that Ericsson has gotten the buy-in to do something like this is already quite remarkable. And I would love to share how that has come about. I think usually the second thing is, in order for something to get started, people need to generate wins pretty quickly. Otherwise, momentum dies. And so how do you figure out the right place to start with the right champions, with the right scoped initiative that's good enough, but also feasible? Like, that is usually quite difficult to do. And then these comments that we're seeing from Nancy and others around, hey, shouldn't we just think beyond the existing construct of a job and a role? I think that starts to get at why something like this is so difficult. Because ultimately, I think for you to become truly skills-based organization, I think you have to break down the current silos of roles, because you're going to be re-architecting jobs based on skills. And as people move around, it'll also change like what they do on a day-to-day basis. You know, I don't like, so I think basically, by the way, one of my takeaways from working in consulting and driving change is that it's just really hard, and most organizations really don't know how to do it because it's just a hard
nice
problem.
To have McKinsey consultant confirm what we suspected. It is really hard. Thank you. Okay.
It's just like it's a very difficult thing to start and sustain.
Yes.
And so usually what I see organizations try to do is ultimately you have to get it started, but then you have to have sort of champions inside the organizations that are very motivated themselves to make the change their own. And you have to sustain their excitement, and you have to like recognize them and let them drive them and upskill them to drive it. And I think usually companies really struggle with that. So like if you have to re-architect roles and jobs like this, it can't be fully top down. Like your top senior executives don't understand like what everyone's doing day to day, which means you're going to have to figure out a way for your different middle-level managers and individual departments and teams to rethink how they are working, given skills at play, but give them the right principles and values and like the North Star to like operate within that change. And I think that's the core difficult part. And I don't think there's like one single playbook or like a silver bullet to that.
There certainly isn't. I love the way you're describing it. I think I was looking at Peter's face. He's smiling a bit. He's like, I think he's thinking to himself, well, yeah, we're going to get to that stage of reorganizing everything. That's going to be like 2 years down the line. We've just got to get the data in and have it all working first, which I think is a legitimate point. But I do think this point of Nancy's and Zolt, is right, which is this, once we start understanding skills properly in the organization, it enables us to organize work in a different way. And there are tremendous benefits from that. I think, though, my answer was, we may just have to go one step at a time. We may have to just get people coming in, understanding what it means to talk about skills, because most people don't have that as a lingua franca in their organization. It's not the common tongue. Once you've got that, and I've had conversations with people when I was doing this 20 years ago, you have a conversation about something as you get the data in place to do something as simple as rewriting job descriptions accurately. It's a really basic, easy, quick win. And once you've got that data in, then people turn around to you and say, well, if we do that, could we do this thing as well? Yes, you can. But like you say, Vince, the momentum has to come, a lot of it, from underneath. But that word momentum, you've used it, Peter's used it, everyone I talk to who's doing this uses it. You have to have somebody at the top who is not going to let this drop. They've got to keep it driving, and you've got to have the people underneath who see the value. And Spencer's saying, I guess to an extent, people can be awarded through comp spends, etc., based on contribution rather than job title, which hinges somewhat on skills and application of those. And I think this is a whole interesting topic. I think we should get to it. I'd love to talk in a bit about how much do we tie skills data explicitly to compensation. Peter, perhaps you can help me with that. I think there are substantial issues with that, but we can look at it.
Yeah, I think that is really tricky. I think just to build on some of the discussion so far, and to Spencer's point there, I think value at the start and value at the end is a really important part. Value at the start comes with experimenting and tests in whether it be AI point solutions or whether it be this bigger skills agenda. Value at the end you can prove, and I think Spencer hits on it a little bit in terms of recognition through mobility. So, once you get AI and this whole skills piece of work supporting your talent marketplaces, and if you've got a talent marketplace, which we do in Ericsson, then we are, for example, matching people through using skills to projects. So, mobility between jobs is quite a hard thing to get, and increasing mobility, particularly when you're fairly flat-lined on headcount. But to actually also get the people to see, well, hold on, I've been matched to this project opportunity here, and actually that looks super interesting. I was looking, for example, I was presenting to our people leadership team today around as to the progress that we are making on this, and there was an opportunity I was presenting there which kind of a leading edge opportunity in Japan, and that would really kind of be interesting if you're a technical person in telco, and that sort of value for the individuals, I think, is something that you can start to drive out. And of course, most talent marketplaces operate on this matching capability, but that matching capability only works if your data is accurate and if you've got the right skills that are in your talent marketplace.
And we were talking earlier about IBM. I remember IBM long ago had professions, perhaps they still do, I don't know, where you had, the idea was you could rise up a profession, you develop your professional skills and you could be a super duper person in that profession without necessarily advancing in a managerial role. So you just were very good at your job. Spencer saying you're looking forward to the next Ericsson case study. Well, we have to bend Peter's arm a bit on that one and get the next one out of him. But yeah, I look forward to too. I just want to quickly reflect on some of the stuff that's been coming through. Trust is a big issue. Then I want to come back and talk about how do we get the buy-in? How do we make it happen? There's a human trust side of things using skills, and this is completely accurate from Zolt. If employees are suspicious about skills as the base for the next layoff, it's really hard to implement it. It's impossible. You get garbage data. And that's my concern also about explicitly tying skills to compensation. It's the other side of the coin. If people think, oh, if I rate myself, or if I'm rated as a 4 rather than a 3, I'll get an uptick in my salary, then your data is skewed. And so you have to somehow make sure that you're not explicitly saying this. I think there's definitely scope for linking qualifications to payment, but I think with skills it's more difficult. I'd love to see people doing it and know how they did it. The trust side is 100% right, and I think if you don't get that right at the start and don't maintain it consciously throughout, you run the risk of the whole thing coming down like a pack of cards. And so moving on here, why concentrate on skills, job descriptions? Sean says AI could be used for the employment journey from talent attraction, career path to finish and retirement. This is AI for the more holistic development of the employee. But Sean, correct me if I'm wrong. Peter, what you're suggesting here is that skills is the common language, the framework by which you make these things possible. And you wouldn't say that it's everything. And skills don't represent everything about a human being. They're an important part of it, but there are other things, of course, which are important.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. You know, there are, you know, I think we have, whether you call them behaviors or whatever, there are core characteristics that are important as well. There are other things that come into the selection of individuals as well. So which is why actually we choose to talk about skills-powered talent practices
Skills
rather than
part, I like that, yeah.
skills-led or skills-driven, because powered is kind of saying skills are adding some value here. They're helping with diversity and inclusion, because you know you're powering that process, you're powering recruitment process, you're powering learning processes. It's not the be all and end all, but it damn well helps. Is kind of what we're saying.
And it doesn't do any harm, Vince. It doesn't do any harm either that all the management magazines are talking about it. So you can't open a copy of any magazine or go to a website without hearing about skills, can you, Vince? So in a way, you can kind of catch a wave of popularity in a way that talking about learning just won't get you anywhere. Is that fair enough, Vince?
I think that's probably true in the community that talks about skills. I still have a question actually, whether a lot of the business executives beyond the HR people, L&D teams, like think about skills, or if that's actually on their agenda, and they're just trying to get their business done, and skills is still an enabler, which means that skills framing by itself, it's really hard to get the authorizing environment to do something unless you're very forward-thinking business executives that think skills is a very critical lever to transforming. So I think it sort of depends, honestly, depending on the senior leadership and how they view skills.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm seeing HBR, Financial Times, Economist. I'm seeing skills coming up again and again as a topic. I'm not saying it's going to be a silver bullet. Leah's saying, yeah, they just want to see ROI. There's a lot there, isn't there? Come on. We want to make sure if we're doing anything, we're going to get value out of it. Learning transfer. I asked Robin earlier, he was talking about using a GPT to assist with learning transfer. Really interesting. And actually, I do know other people doing this. Robin's doing a great job here. Look, having a 24/7 mentor specifically trained on the research, which informs the learning journey, builds confidence, and individuals are already doing this using GPT and similar, but they're insufficiently specific for supporting action after the program. And that's, I think, the key point, Robin, isn't it? That if you're training people and you want to get them to use what they've learned at work, that idea of having almost like a personal coach, a mentor, somebody by your side that's a GPT that supports you in doing and prompts you, if I've got it right, a mentor, you're putting it. I love that idea. I'm going to go straight to Peter now. We've talked about how it's a great idea. We've talked about how you can use AI in a range of things, including, crucially, using skills as a sort of in lingua franca across the organization for solving a variety of problems. How do you get the buy-in? How do you actually make big stuff happen like this? And how can L&D use this, to use Vince's words, to move from being at a basic, well, not basic, but being at the training level to being more strategic? Peter.
Look, I think the engagement of the organization on this can come through a few different methods. You know, one is, and then actually I want to circle back on what Robin is saying there about coaching, because I think that's super important, which is, so I think it is about getting engagement through showing value add, as we've talked already. It is about when you are working on things, whether it be AI or skills, that you are getting the cross, if you are part of a people function or an HR function, that you're getting across the board involvement. You know, when we worked on all of these things, it wasn't just L&D working in its silo. It was all the different SME functions. It's also about engaging with the business. You know, I mentioned we got over sort of 90 job role owners. We have skill area owners, 20 skill area owners. It's about distributing the responsibility out through the business, not trying to do all your stuff centrally. So I think all of those are important. I'm going to switch now to what a little bit Don was talking about, kind of the way that we use community as well. I think you get engagement of the business through possibly through the power of community as well. We have my team for a while has now ran what we call this Learning Next forum, and that Learning Next forum has kind of over 400 people across the business, from all sorts of jobs, all sorts of backgrounds, who are interested in using the power of AI and XR and those sorts of things in learning. And that means, when I talked about that, we had scaled very quickly from, tens of people with a text to video tool to over 1,000, that came through that community. And it suddenly gains a life of its own because we've got the engagement of that community. So I think that is how you get the engagement of the business. Some ideas there for you. Can I, though, just be cheeky, Don, and just circle back on Robin's comment there about,
of course,
because what I think AI has done, and I don't want this to become too skill-centric, this conversation, because I think what AI also has the power to do is to democratize. I said it's about pushing L&D up the value chain. It also has the opportunity to democratize the access to learning. And coaching is a great example. At one point in my career, I worked with talent management. Talent management was to some extent about the few. You got a great human mentor allocated to you if you were a high potential or you're an executive. What we want to be able to do is democratize that access. Tools, the sorts of new coaching tools that are coming out at the moment, and there's many of them on the market, have that ability. So we are looking at the moment, we have as to whether we can introduce a coaching tool for everybody in Ericsson, which goes beyond a talent marketplace, because I want my, if you like, personal coach here to help career coach me. I want them to help performance coach me. Can I achieve, to what extent can I achieve that? Now, I can achieve that in a text way, just through ChatGPT, through Microsoft Copilot, some of these many tools that are out there. And that's already possible within Ericsson. But we want to see whether you can actually take that to have an avatar-based tool.
Yeah.
And so I can start to engage with an avatar that I trust. And that trust issue is central to that. And it's so I think that democratization of coaching and mentoring is important in this journey around AI.
Thank you. That is really important, and thank you for raising it. So I'm just going to go over to the chat. I don't like talent management, says Tiffany. I talk about it as talent enhancement. Management's passive, enhancement's more proactive. Fair. Yeah. Peter, I talked to her about momentum. Vince talked about the need to have people buying to this stuff on the ground. What is it that will enable Ericsson to get through to next April? You've already been on this journey for a couple of years. What will get you through to next April, to that next cycle of reviews? What will get you a year beyond that? How are you going to maintain it?
I think actually starting to build out practical examples. So I think, if we look across the whole of what AI is doing, if you look at some of the point solutions, you say, then we will build examples of that. So we will, within our learning community, we will start to build out how it is, how you can utilize some of these new tools, how you can start to get performance support. So, for example, we are testing Copilot at the moment, and we are starting to pull out what are the learning value in Copilot, and of course that relates mostly to performance support. On the use of AI in skills, we will have to, what will get us through is if we can start to see the value of skills in workforce planning. So can you start to help organizations to plan not only on what are the numbers of people they need, but also what are the skills that they need for the future? So they can start to have that. And what will also get us through it is that we can start to demonstrate the skills progression in the organization. You know, we produce a skills report every year that we make available to line managers. If managers are starting to see that we are getting faster skills progression in the organization, then that will help us get through. If employees start to see that their experience is better, they start to see that we are connecting the dots between both the different systems, but also the different people processes, that will help us get us through. So it's people, it's whether it helps us to simplify the employee experience, whether it directly contributes to business value, whether it enables the whole managers to see skills progression. It's those sorts of things that will help us get through.
Thank you for that. I think it's a really good exploration of the various nuanced ways in which this comes down to delivering value. You have faith behind you, supporting you up to a point, but at some point you just got to show up with something that's done, a problem that you've solved. Vince, we've got like 5 minutes left or something, and I'm sorry, I've been prompting Peter because he's the man who's in the middle of doing the fight at the moment. But what do you want to share about your reflections on this?
I mean, everything that it's been fascinating to hear, and it's really amazing what Ericsson's doing, and to hear the discussion on skills. I guess the thing I would just add to it, and people started to hint on it in the chat, is I think it's really important to keep in mind the will and the motivation of humans.
Yes.
I think a lot of the discussion of AI is somewhat dehumanizing, actually, if I sort of were to describe it. Like, it's very much like personalized recommendations, or like breaking down people into things and tasks and skills and so on. Those are good enablers. But I think at the core, in my own experience, the best performance in team and culture gets built because people want to do something, and they're motivated to do something. And the concept of human motivation is not talked about enough, I feel like, in the way that AI gets enabled and rolled out. And so I think it's really important to think through, are we creating a system with AI that makes humans want to do their best work? Or are we just sort of not rolling out systems in the absence of that? And I think that's a really important role that L&D should play. And L&D is very well suited to play, because L&D is very thoughtful usually about what gets people to want to do something and create space to do that.
I think it's really good. Zsolt says back to self-determination theory, and I always say that everything else, and it's ridiculous. I've been doing this for like 35, 40 years. I've finally got to where you are, Vince, which is understanding that actually it almost always comes down to motivation and understanding human behavior, and that's crucial. And good point here. I'd love to have AI recognize best practices and share those actionable, practical items for the right people at the right time. I think there's an awful lot in that, Zsolt. I think one of the issues is sharing it to the right people at the right time. But bit by bit, I can see that we're getting there, and certainly recognizing best practice with a human element to help, I think it's happening at the moment anyway. The delivery side of it, not quite so much. Leah's saying +1 for self-determination theory. Very good. I'm going to just put some links in the chat, because I suspect we had some books and some other stuff being recommended. I'm going to put some links into Peter, to Vince, to myself on LinkedIn, link to Sparkwise, link to the latest report, and a link to my co-author, Egla Vinauskaite. That's a bit of a noisy thing I've dropped in there. And so please, if you've got any other links that you want to share, please do drop them in. I'm just going to, we've got like 2 minutes left. I'm going to just jump over to Peter, and then to Vince, and then to myself. I'm going to just wrap up with the final question. What is it that we should be doing? What is it that everybody in the room and all of us can be doing to, well, it's come up to 5 o'clock here in the UK, so I won't say now, but let's say tomorrow morning, to start taking action on AI in learning and development? What should we be doing? Peter, what's your view? What's the message?
For me, it's experiment. You can spend lots of time thinking about all the different possibilities. You can spend lots of time securing stakeholder input and so on. But in the end, you've got to have something to show for it. And you don't get something to show for it unless you start to experiment. Start small, grow big. So that would be my main recommendation, is go out there, experiment, show value.
But what I love about your experiments at Ericsson, Peter, is they're not experiments that are willy-nilly. They're experiments that are directed on particular areas of work streams that you think are important, and you have a decision-making process at the end. Do we buy? Yeah. Do we build? Do we wait? I love that. I love that process.
Yeah, and that's a classic. We've talked about coaching here, and that's exactly what we have been through with that sort of example. We said we wanted to do something around AI-based coaching, and we've gone through the buy or do we build type, or do we wait? So those kind of three has been our way of approaching this.
Thank you, Vince. What should we be doing tomorrow morning?
I love Peter's point on experimentation. So I would second that and I guess add a flavor to it. So I guess my perspective on experimentation comes from running a startup, which is by definition has to be an experiment. You have to get there very quickly and iterate. And if I were an L&D person, I would start by saying, where is there demand for support with AI? With startups, the number one thing you got to figure out is demand. Does anyone want the thing? And you start with the right person and the right content who's willing to experiment with you. And so I would say the number one thing is which leader and department in the organizations are willing and able to experiment with me, and just defining the right small thing to do and demonstrate value, I think is a great way to start. And then work your way up to solving truly a CEO level problem that the organization is facing.
It's a really good point. I'm going to draw my thank you for that, Vince. I'm going to draw my advice from Robin, who's saying, best practice makes me nervous. There's always room for improvement. And I would say, for me, it's look for what other companies are doing. And actually, David Friedman wrote this point, but he put it into hosts and panelists. Look at the best companies' best practice. I'd say, look at good practice. Look at good practice wherever you find it, and then accept there is no such thing as best practice. There is good practice plus context. So take what other people have done, look at your own context, adapt it to fit your particular circumstances, and always talk to other people, or talk to other people in L&D outside the company, and talk to other people outside L&D in your company to get that lens on where you should be going and where, as Vince says, the best value is. You can't forget, Sinead, it's just coming at the last, the importance of universal design for learning to assist all types of learning. Thank you. Good point. My big clock that we were talking about says it's 1700 hours, 5 o'clock p.m. in the UK. Bang on time. I want to say thank you to Peter from Ericsson for really sharing the hard-won lessons learned of doing this stuff and keeping doing it, that business momentum. Peter, thank you very much. Vince, thank you. You're Mr. Sparkwise. You've set the whole thing up. Thank you so much. Would you like any final words?
Thank you. No, just thank you both for having the conversation. I learned a ton. It's really fascinating what Ericsson's doing. And Don, your research is also really fascinating. So people should definitely check it out. And I'm really glad that people tuned in today.
I guess we'll do another one of these soon. I hope so. Yeah. If we do, you can expect to get an email about it. In the meantime, wherever you are in the world, and whatever the weather is like, to go back to our opening gambit, I hope you are going to have a great evening, afternoon, whatever. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye.